Beth, finance report?
Good morning. As you know, today we are requesting approval for adoption of the FY10 budget we've been talking about since January. Today, and the budget now represents the culmination of an extensive, very detailed agency-wide process that we do every year, where we evaluate revenue sources and look at prioritization of spending in all departments. But as I've been reporting to you each month, this year the process was really driven by the declining payroll tax revenues resulting from the recession. So just to review, 55% of our operating revenues come from payroll taxes, and because payroll tax revenues are directly impacted by regional unemployment and lower wages, the budget has to reflect this reduction in available resources. So the budget, for the first time in many years, TriMet has needed to make cuts to programs and services to produce a balanced budget, which is what we're presenting today. As we end fiscal year 09 next week, we see payroll tax receipts. They're actually slightly below receipts in fiscal year 08. And that's a little worse than it sounds, because having revenues that are below last year, we had a 0.01% tax increase, meaning that the underlying growth has been negative in the region. And that's contrary to what we've been experiencing over the last decade and really the last 4 to 5 years, when underlying growth, even without the payroll tax increase, has been averaged about 6.5% per year. So our budget is based on the revenue forecast, which takes into account the current economic realities of the region and the state, and including each month we look at the data, and the May data followed the trend. We see the Oregon state unemployment rate in May of 12.4%. Again, this month we're the second highest in the nation, and it's the highest rate on record in the state of Oregon. In the three counties, our three counties this month, each county was 11% or higher, and the average rate in the Tri-County area was 11.5%. And that compares to an average rate at this time last year of under 5%. We are an exaggerated example of what's been happening around the nation, how quickly unemployment has risen. Our May total employment, which is what really drives the payroll tax receipts, continues to decline, but the rate is slower than what we've seen in past months, and that also reflects national trends. But to put that in perspective, there are almost 50,000 fewer jobs in the three counties than there were in May last year. And while there are signs of recovery nationally, more housing sales and other positive green shoots, as the press calls it, historically growth in employment has lagged other economic indicators. So the forecast for payroll tax revenues underlying our budget is unchanged since the budget you approved in April that we submitted to the TSCC, and assumes flat actual revenue receipts in FY10. One slight change we have made since April is to slightly lower the estimated growth in passenger revenue from the April estimates, reflecting the lower ridership that we've seen this spring due to the recession, as fewer people commute to work and fewer people use transit for leisure activities on the weekend. But we are still projecting growth in ridership given the addition of the Green Line to 5. So overall, the budget that we're asking for approval today is consistent with what you approved in April. And today's resolution addresses minor changes as we refined and finalized all the departmental line items. And Fred will discuss in greater detail the cuts. But I would like to emphasize and note, as I know Fred will, that the inclusion of over $7 million of federal stimulus money, which were allowed for operations. As you recall, most stimulus money is not being applied to operations, but the inclusion of this $7 million in our operating budget did directly reduce the magnitude of the cuts that we needed to make to services. Fred will talk about that. The budget also includes the authority to continue to levy the property tax, $10 million a year on property taxes within the district, to support the 1992 voter-approved bonds. Those were refunded in 1999 to lower the rates. TriMet originally issued about $80 million of debt, and now there's approximately $36 million remaining outstanding, and those will be fully redeemed by July 2012. Turning briefly to the May financials, the year-to-date operating, I'm focusing on the year-to-date rather than monthly. The year-to-date results are consistent with the economic picture we just talked about. Operating revenues are lower due to lower payroll tax receipts and lower self-employment receipts. And fortunately, expenses continue to run under budget as well. There are many line items throughout the agency that are under budget and slightly over budget, but there are two primary factors that contribute or that largely account for the favorable expense variation, and that's fuel costs lower than what we budgeted last year, and lift and accessible transportation costs that are under budget, due both to the lower fuel costs associated with lift and also very slight decline in the ridership this year as compared to what we've been seeing as a 3% annual growth in what was budgeted. And also commuter rail expenses remain under budget for the year, primarily because we opened later, so operating expenses were less. On the balance sheet, I just want to call your attention to the cash and investments line. You'll see a decline in cash and investments of about $70 million as we used that money to call a portion of the 2006 FTA-backed bonds when we received grant funds last month. And this decline in cash on the balance sheet is offset by a reduction in the liabilities as we redeem the bonds. So we get cash in from the FTA, from the grant. We send out a notice 30 days in advance to bondholders, so the cash stays in our account for 30 days. Then we use that cash to redeem the bond. So the balance sheet goes up and down, reflecting that. And I'm pointing this out because you'll see similar movements on future monthly reports. And this week we just instructed again the trustee to send the 30-day notice to bondholders to call an additional $27 million of the 2006 bonds because we received more money from the FTA. This is grants for the 205 Green Line. Now we had anticipated this money. The 2006 bonds were sold based on the expectation that the FTA grants would come in. But the good news is that we're receiving these grant dollars earlier than anticipated, and that reduced our interest costs. So a rough number is $70 million. If we pay it down 3 months early, we save over $700,000. So the FTA accelerating their grant receipts to us is very positive. And I just will close with reporting back to you that this week we closed on the line of credit that we had discussed with you earlier this year. We have not drawn on it, but the line allows us to draw at very low cost to pay for capital investments, or if we need to meet cash flow needs on an interim basis. And we do anticipate issuing long-term bonds for capital projects later in the year. We'll come back and talk to you about that. But in the meantime, we can draw on the line to facilitate those if we need to. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.